What if, Joel? I mean, we've come this far. Let's just finish it.
Do I need to remind you what is out there?
On the surface, The Last of Us is nothing new. In fact, much of what you'll find in the game is rather cliché to the genre from which it pulls inspiration. Post-apocalyptic zombie fiction has invariably been done before, and in this day and age, it's arguably overdone to the point of exhaustion and indifference. Occasionally, however, an experience comes along that shatters what we think we know, redefining our expectations of something that's so undeniably familiar. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the sources from which The Last of Us seemingly gets its inspiration, but to say that it's simply a copycat with a fresh coat of paint would be doing The Last of Us a disservice. The Last of Us stands on its own as a monumental achievement in storytelling, and is unquestionably the best piece of interactive fiction available on the PlayStation 3. Cliché is actually something developer Naughty Dog has done exceptionally well over the years. Their critically acclaimed Uncharted series, as adventurous and charming as it is really nothing more than a mountain of adventure tropes, the spitting image of an Indiana Jones movie. 3 games featuring a witty main character, action-packed set pieces, and waves of bad guys. We've seen this all before, and if anybody can execute it in a video game better than the rest, it's Naughty Dog. The Last of Us discards this formula. Naughty Dog has traded its vibrant and fun, globe-trotting treasure hunt for a world that's bleak and melancholic. The Last of Us is shocking, heartbreaking, visceral, and violent, almost all at once. To even say that The Last of Us is fun is confusing in and of itself. Much of what you'll experience throughout the game is so alarmingly violent and necessary that to imagine placing yourself in the character's shoes would be anything but fun. Like Telltale Games' The Walking Dead, there is a massive weight and irrevocable consequence to everything you do in The Last of Us, and for me, at just over 19 hours, I managed to walk away from the game feeling weak and drained, riding off a nervous adrenaline rush that never left me throughout the entire game. I felt as weary and tired as the survivors themselves.
You mumble in your sleep.
The Last of Us is a game that almost defies genres. Calling it an action survival horror game seems about right, but it doesn't do the experience any justice. The Last of Us takes place in North America in the year 2033, 20 years after a deadly fungal outbreak eliminating most of the world's population. However, much like The Walking Dead in Metro 2033, The Last of Us doesn't so much care for the reason why the zombie-like pandemic came to be, but rather how its inhabitants are left struggling to live on in a collapsed society where there are no more rules and where your closest friend could be your worst enemy in the face of survival. With that struggle comes desperation, vulnerability, and terrifying insecurity.
Really? Guess what? We're shitty people, Joel. It's been that way for a long time.
No, we are survivors.
This is our chance.
It is over, Tess! No.
During the game's gut punch of an intro, you're introduced to Joel, a weary and grizzled survivor who lives day to day arduously smuggling, taking up odd jobs, and scavenging for whatever it takes to see the sun rise again. To Joel, taking another person's life is often a means to an end, and after losing everything he's ever had, death itself has little to no effect on him, and he's well aware that in this world it's either him or them. He's bitter and broken, but deep within him lies a compassion that he rarely wears in his sleeve. Troy Baker delivers an outstanding performance as Joel, possibly the best in his career, and unrecognizable from the rest of his work, and every nuance and subtlety in his dialogue is carefully executed.
There's one in this town.
Parts. There are parts in this town.
Meaning that you could fix one up.
Circumstances leave Joel with delivering a package from the militia-controlled Boston to a resistance group known as the Fireflies on the other side of the country. This package is the true shining star of the show, a 14-year-old girl by the name of Ellie. Wonderfully voiced by the lovely Ashley Johnson, Ellie is full of life and youthful exuberance. Ellie was born after the collapse, and because of this, much of what was left of the world before her is a mystery, leaving her full of wonder and questions. She'll whistle and hum tunes while Joel is rummaging through the wasteland, curiously thumb through records in an abandoned music store, ask a million questions about Joel and his past, and engage him in conversation about random topics that you'd expect a 14-year-old girl to be concerned with. Throughout The Last of Us, you'll see her learn how to use a gun and fend for herself, growing up along the way. Ellie's ignorance is endearing, but don't let that fool you. She's got the mouth of a sailor and knows her way around a knife.
I shot the hell out of that guy, huh?
The high points of The Last of Us are spent developing Joel and Ellie, and the relationship with one another, a somewhat dysfunctional father-daughter relationship, which is cantankerous at first and takes a long while before any sort of affection sets in. This relationship is accompanied by outstanding dialogue and optional conversations that really do well to build these two characters, and it's strengthening that connection that really makes The Last of Us enjoyable. By the end of the game, I was so emotionally invested in each of them that I was ultimately sad to see the credits roll, and this only further exemplifies how marvelously each character was crafted.
Me? Thanks for saving my ass. You got anything like that for me, Joel?
We gotta get going.
Lead the way.
Of course, the journey of Joel and Ellie would be nothing without the backdrop of a ruined United States to accompany them. The events that transpire within The Last of Us hit hard and stay with you because of the environment's constant believability. Metropolises are crumbled, eerily silent and overgrown with dense foliage. Litter flies through the air. Cars and buses are left to rust on the side of the road, and neighborhoods are abandoned with telltale signs of the life that existed before things turned for the worst. You'll find helpful notes, lost letters, and more that tell incidental stories of the people that have long gone. There is an exquisite attention to detail in everything there is to see, and Naughty Dog's ability to tell a story with the surroundings is brilliant, giving a visual feast that shares no equal on the PlayStation 3. The Last of Us demands exploration, and you'd be wise to do so, as it will assist you greatly in one of the more frighteningly fantastic aspects of the game, combat. Joel and Ellie aren't the only survivors in this wasteland, and you'll learn that very early on in the game. Just as greenery has taken over the torn landscape, so too have others just like Joel, some a lot more dangerous than others. The enemies that you'll encounter share a similar mindset in that survival is the name of the game in this world, and they will use every tool they have to take you down. Enemy AI is brilliant, taking cover, flanking, searching, and reacting to every move you make. Around every corner is imminent peril, and staying alive will have your palms sweating profusely. Killing enemies in The Last of Us doesn't quite embody the cartoony violence and gore that you'd find in Gears of War or Devil May Cry. Instead, the game portrays a more realistic approach that, for all intents and purposes, borders necessity to stay true to its gruesome setting. Don't get me wrong, crushing a man's skull into a wall is insanely satisfying, but there's something deeply disturbing and savagely real about it that never sits right in your stomach. Surviving in The Last of Us is a delicate balancing act of sneaking and careful resource management. Unlike the Uncharted series, going gung-ho in The Last of Us will almost certainly guarantee a quick death in most situations. Stealth plays a huge role in combat, and allows for Joel to silently take out foes without alerting the rest of them, whether that be with a disturbingly realistic chokehold or a quick shiv to the throat. Stalking your prey is nerve-wracking and incredibly tense, and it's largely the reason I was so taxed by the game's end. You can alleviate some of that stress by holding down the R2 button, which allows Joel to listen carefully to his surroundings, giving him a glance at enemy locations in the area, much like Detective Mode in the Batman Arkham series and Dark Vision in Dishonored. It's been a recent trend for games that ask stealth of its players to almost inherently offer an ability like this, but I was a little disappointed to see that it was included in The Last of Us. Given the tense and realistic tone of the game, having a somewhat supernatural ability, coupled with the occasional clunky partner AI that the enemies never seem to notice, interrupted my sense of belief in a world that Naughty Dog had so convincingly created. Whether you use listen mode or not, successfully stealth killing your way through an area is extremely satisfying, and while easier isn't exactly a good term, it's in most cases safer than the alternative.
We're clear.
If shooting is your only option, then you're not entirely out of luck because by the game's end, Joel will have access to an arsenal of weapons. However, given how scavenged the environments are, ammunition is in very short supply, so you're going to have to make every bullet count. In addition to human enemies, friend and foe can agree that the truest threat in The Last of Us are the infected, humans who have fallen victim to the fungal epidemic. The infected are ruthless and terrifying, and they attack with reckless abandon with the sole purpose of killing and infecting others. Many of the game's darkest sections are crawling with them, and it's these segments that truly live up to the brand of survival horror. Stealthy shiv strikes are the preferred method of execution for these guys, but if you choose, you're more than welcome to dump entire clips of that precious ammunition into them, because that's often what it takes to take them down. If the infected get the upper hand on you, it's game over, literally. There are several versions of the infected, and while many of them can only sense you by sound, you're never truly safe when they're around. Naughty Dog adds to the combat by allowing players to craft items, both curative and offensive. However, in keeping with the immediacy and realism of the game, all of this crafting happens in real time, on the fly. If you need to craft a health kit in the middle of a shootout, you don't get to pause the action. You find yourself a dark corner and hope that nobody finds you. Rummaging through the environments will net you the components to create several things like the previously mentioned health kits, Molotov cocktails, smoke bombs, and more. The challenge here is that these components are scarce, and many of the items that you can craft share the same ones. The Last of Us asks its players to fight their routine impulses when it comes to enemy encounters, and make split-second judgment calls that may not seem entirely right or wrong in the heat of the moment. Adding the inclusion of upgrading weapons and certain survival skills, and it's this decision-making that really makes the combat in The Last of Us dynamically different, and you won't find it in very many other games. You can always do things differently the next time around in the game's New Game Plus feature, where you'll finally be able to max out your abilities and weapons. In addition to the lengthy campaign, Naughty Dog bundled The Last of Us with a robust multiplayer mode called Factions. In Factions, players can choose between two sides, the Hunters and the Fireflies. Once your alignment is chosen, you can hop right into two different modes, Supply Raid and Survivors. Success in the multiplayer modes will require players to craft items in real time and scavenge for parts throughout the maps which can be exchanged in the in-game store for weapons and armor upgrades, similarly to the single-player mode. Supply Raid is largely comparable to the Team Deathmatch, with teams fighting to whittle down the other's set supply of shared lives. Players looking for a familiar point of entry will feel at home in this mode. The Survivors mode offers a more meticulous experience that plays a lot like the campaign. Unlike Supply Raid, however, dying will force you to sit out for the rest of the round, and players not wanting to be a disappointment to their team will want to play more cautiously.
Dead!
Regardless of which mode you play, both are a blast, but if you choose to skip the multiplayer altogether, it's okay. The solo ride to The Last of Us is more than worth the price of admission. With all of the violence, desolation, and weird mushroom people, it's easy to look past what The Last of Us is really all about. At the forefront of The Last of Us is humanity, our basic need to build connections with the ones we hope we can trust, despite our instinct to do what it takes to see another day. Like The Walking Dead, it's not about the zombies or the bad guys or even the end of the world. It's about holding out for a glimmer of hope and the true value of friendships. The other stuff is just filler. I've mentioned that cliché is somewhat of a reoccurring theme when it comes to Naughty Dog. With the oversaturation of zombie stuff on the market these days, it would be easy to brush The Last of Us aside and skip it entirely. Yet despite the familiarity, The Last of Us is an emotionally grueling and incredibly well-made work of art. And it's crystal clear that not only is Naughty Dog the best developer in the industry, but The Last of Us is the best game on the PlayStation 3. As the dawn of a new console generation approaches, now is the prime opportunity to play the best game that our console generation has to offer. It's just a shame that it took 7 years to get it.
So is that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out. But man, can't deny that view.